Okay, hi everyone. Welcome to the ZAPD meetup for today, the final one of 2023. Thanks very much for joining us. I'm just going to do a little bit of housekeeping and then we'll introduce ourselves. And then thanks to everyone who sent in questions. We'll be going through as many of those as we possibly can. And as we go along, if you have any questions, please just post them in the YouTube live chat. They will automatically come through to us here and we will pop them on the screen as we go through them. Okay, so as usual, just thanks to our sponsors, of which we have four. NML, a software development company in Cape Town that's been sponsoring all our things for around 10 years now already, maybe longer. IO, Liesel Bester, the operations manager at IO, is actually the founder of ZAPD. She unfortunately can't be with us tonight, but she's also been a long-time supporter of Schalk and I in our front-end endeavors. And then Code Capsules, a local deployment company for hosting and all sorts of great things. If you're familiar with Netlify, it's kind of like a South African version of that. Highly recommend checking them out. They sponsor all our monthly workshops that we hold. And then Codespace Academy, which is a learning institution also in Cape Town, very kindly give us their venue once a month to host our workshops on a Saturday morning. Yeah, so thanks to all of those sponsors. Without them, we obviously wouldn't be able to bring you all of these nice things. So yeah, thanks very much. Right, then we've got two FEDSA events coming up, which will be the last two for the year. On the 9th of December, we're running a community collaboration project where we're going to collectively build an open source website with a design that's already been done for that. And it will be for community-driven tech events, conferences, and communities in South Africa. So just a nice space to host all of those things in one place. And then the monthly, is it monthly or bi-weekly? I can't remember, Schalk. JavaScript Breakpoint.
Monthly, thank goodness. Yeah, not every second week. Please don't.
Is the final one for the year will come up, is coming up on the 11th of December. And 4 of the greatest minds in JavaScript in South Africa, one of whom is erstwhile Schalk Venter, discuss all the latest events and happenings in the world of JavaScript. So highly recommend that you spend some time having a look at that. It's a live stream on YouTube during lunchtime. Right. I'm just going to take the slides away quickly so we can all introduce ourselves. I'll start with myself. My name's Justin. I'm head of design and front end at the aforementioned NML. No conflict of interest between sponsorship and this talk, I promise. Opinions are my own, etc. Yeah, I've been working in front end and UI design for longer than I probably should have. And I run a team of designers and front-end developers, currently 9 of us. So yeah, quite a large team. And we design and build software primarily for the financial services industry. Yeah.
Cool.
So I think we can just introduce ourselves.
Yes, please.
All right. Okay, so I'll go and then I'll hand over to Jenna. So yeah, Schalk. Involved in a ton of stuff. I earn a salary by doing consulting work, various places. Also very much in the world of academia, also interested in some very interesting postgrad stuff at the moment as well, in kind of software development and so forth as well. And yeah, kind of like various touch points in product design, software engineering and so forth. But my formal background is in design. I studied back then. It was called applied design. That's when this term graphic design was still kind of this new weird thing, and no one really knew what graphic design was. And yeah, also have a couple of postgrads in visual arts and illustration and painting and stuff as well. But do a lot of software engineering nowadays as well. So yeah, that's kind of me. And so Jenna is kind of a new face. We haven't heard her on here. So Jenna, do you want to tell us a bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, hi everyone. My name is Jenna. I have a bit of an accent. I'll just preface that. My mom's Canadian, but I am South African. I grew up here and I studied at Cape Town Creative Academy. I'm mentioning my studies because I am still quite young. I'm only 25. Been working for 3 years in this industry, but I'm quite fortunate to have actually like been able to do my degree at a time where there was a degree in such a thing called interaction design and UX. So that was great. I didn't know about it, in high school, but then the university introduced it to me, so that was great. And I needed internship hours to graduate, so did that at a company called Specno, and fully intended to do my hours and move to Canada, but then fell in love with the company and the culture, and it was a startup, so I just ended up staying there for 2.5 years. Absolutely loved my time there, and attribute a lot of my experience and growth to that company. And I tell all my students now, because I'm actually a part-time lecturer as well now, but I tell all of them, if you can work at a startup out the gate, start freelancing or contracting later on, I think that will set you up for success. But I eventually left Specno to become a consultant or independent contractor, as I wanted to explore that world and have the privilege of choosing the projects I want to work on, and also at longer times, right? Because at an agency, it's there's a lot going on. But that's a little bit about me. But any freelance related questions I'd love to get into, because I have recently experienced that transition. So compared to full time, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Also, Specna is very much kind of in a startup space, right?
Yes, and their main
Yeah.
clients are first-time founders. So a lot of the projects are MVPs, and it's really great to be able to design from scratch. There are some, more corporate contracts, but they're very much in that startup space, which is exciting.
Yeah, it's very much kind of the same type of stuff that IO does as well. So yeah, that's a very interesting space. Sorry, I'm already going on a tangent. Never mind. All right, let's get to the questions. I'm going to have to rein myself in a bit because I have so many thoughts, so many opinions.
Cool.
Right. Okay. So thanks to everyone who submitted questions to us. I've just gone and collated them into a little bit of structure. So we had a lot that were similar in nature, and just made a few categories out of those, and we'll go through them. And the first category that kind of made sense to start with, which was starting and learning in product design, and some questions here around wanting to learn more about product design, what courses, what reading materials, what's the best place to start, best resources, where do you find out about current design trends, and things like that. The first question here is slightly different. Where should you start with a design when there are lots of problems to solve? So I think let's go through the questions around resources and learning, and it's really a question of how do I get into the product design industry at its heart. Any thoughts?
Yeah, that's
a large question.
That's a hard question to answer. Are we gonna first start with a working definition of what we mean by design? So yeah, the reason why I'm saying that is because whoever asked the question probably has a very specific type of answer they're looking for, which we might not be able to infer from just the broadness of the question itself. So apologies if we kind of completely missed the point. I'll maybe give a quick answer, and then I'll give to you guys to unpack it a bit more. But I think yes, man. Okay, I'm gonna have to really be cognizant of the things I say and so forth, because I tend to have very strong opinions. So first and foremost, I think one needs to be honest that you can enjoy product design per se in itself, but I'm pretty convinced that the manner in which we do it, the decisions we make, all three of us here, and also just people at large in the industry, do it because they want to earn a living from it. Okay, so obviously you do product. So if you really enjoy it, like Justin and I do it quite a bit with kind of the Zap and the FedSA stuff. Just we have that hackathon on Saturday where we're just going to do some product design and so forth. So I enjoy it. I know a lot of people enjoy it, but I think first and foremost, there are realities around career and so forth. So I think for me, I would maybe try and figure it out in that way instead of just thinking about design as this thing that you just do for no reason, or like as a means in itself. So where should I start when there are lots of problems to solve? You're probably trying to solve a problem yourself by actually considering product design or being a product designer in your own life, whether that is I want to buy groceries or whatever. And I think rather let that guide you as opposed to just thinking about product design as this abstract thing that you just do. At some point, you need to think about how do you apply these skills. Justin, I'm curious to hear your thoughts as well. Sorry, that was the worst answer ever. But I think I have a bit of a chip on my shoulder around this in terms of that. I think we're not honest enough about the fact that we're doing these things because we want to earn a salary. And all the discussion needs to flow from there. We're not doing this because from the goodness of our hearts or so forth. Sorry, Justin, maybe you can do better than that. That was the worst answer ever.
I'm not sure that I can, Schalk. And I think the first thing you said about, do we get into the weeds of defining what design is? I mean, it does become a fundamental question there. But we only have one evening, unfortunately. So, I mean, there's the kind of things where you say, well, how do I get into a particular career, if we can phrase it that way? And there are a number of routes you can take. I mean, when Schalk, you can attest, when you and I started out, there was no such thing as learning how to be an interaction designer. I mean, that didn't even exist as a discipline.
There was web design, but that wasn't a field. It was something that you do in the same way you do a flyer or a book, or you just design a website. Slice it up in Photoshop and all that nonsense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there wasn't always that real there wasn't that differentiation where this is a field of specialization and speciality where you can work on certain things. I'm a bit not skeptical is the wrong word, but I think you need to, if you're going the higher education route, you need to make that choice of where you go very, very carefully in terms of what you're going to learn. You don't want to learn a tool. Anyone can learn a tool. You don't want to go and do a course where you learn how to use Figma, for example, as a starting point. You can learn a tool that's easy. Okay, it's not easy. That's the wrong word. But you need to look at something that has more of a grounding in concepts and theories. And I think one of the ways in which education in the design field goes very wrong is that it becomes very tool-based rather than around, I mean, in Schalk, again, you ask the question, what do we mean when we say design? You need to figure that out for yourself before you consider what you want to do within that. And that was also not a great answer and quite vague. Maybe you can.
No, you guys did great. Maybe while I'm speaking, what could be helpful, I'll send it in the chat, that Notion link that I'd mentioned to you guys previously.
Yes,
it's sending through, but it has failed to post. We'll post it in the description after this call, but
I'll quickly pop it in the comments.
Thanks. So that link that I just posted is a Notion repository that I've tried to put together of, it's called UX Career Pivots. So from which career are you looking to pivot? If that's, your scenario, are you an architect? Are you a graphic designer? Are you a business analyst? And you're just wanting to get involved in tech or like product design, the whole life cycle of, because that's echoing what Justin and Schalk were saying is what facet of product design are you interested in, and like where might your skills overlap? Like, for example, if you're a graphic designer, you might be, have more of an inclination towards UI design, right? And so then the courses that you do or the portfolio you put together might be more involved with that compared to maybe you don't actually want to be pushing pixels. I like that term that my colleagues and I use. Like, maybe you don't want to be the one executing on the designs, but you want to be involved in the concept. So then perhaps you're more suited to being a product owner or a system analyst of some kind. So I hope my repository or just knowing this can give you a bit of direction of, okay, this is the avenue I'm going to enter this space in. And then just practically of how to get started. I mean, most jobs, if you're pixel pushing or you're a designer more on that side, you're going to need some kind of portfolio, right? And so then, I would advise tutorials or courses that help you get that up and going. And just so that you have something to show for yourself, and doing any sort of UI challenges. And at the moment, Figma is the main software, so you're going to have to learn one. But I love what you guys are saying about not getting too knocked down by that, or too overwhelmed with, I don't know, all the shortcuts, whatever, because that can stump your growth, certainly. So hopefully that answered something.
Definitely. Thanks. And thank you for that resource. That is really fantastic. I urge everyone to have a look at it.
And if your question was more concrete in terms of like, what do I start with, wireframes or whatever? Sorry for giving such broad answers.
Actually,
and it wasn't about where do I start my career.
That's that first question though, where should I start with design when there's lots of problems to solve? I think when I read it in the Google form, the person was referring to, I think they mentioned they just started at a startup and they're involved in design now, and there's an existing product and now they don't know where to start, like what flow to prioritize. Do I do research or do I just jump in? I think that was more the question for that first one.
I see. Okay.
Had about that.
Okay. So we can return to that again as well, because with that context, I would also add some other things to that, but I don't want to get bogged down because at this rate, see you guys tomorrow morning.
But question does come up again in one of our further categories, so let's maybe defer it till then, and then we can deal with it then. The easier ones to ask here are literally what resources and places to investigate current design trends. I mean, we can make lots of recommendations on those. There's so many out there. I mean, maybe we could all just say like one or two of our favorite resources that we get a lot of use out of. I mean, one of mine is Smashing Magazine. I'm always reading that, both from their UI UX stuff and their front end stuff that they do on there. It's a really great learning resource. And then an old standard, the Norman Nielsen group.
Damn it! Stole mine, Justin.
Is that yours?
I always say that like Nielsen Norman is kind of like the MDN of product design.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Whenever Skulk and I are talking about front end development, we tell people go to MDN. When you talk about UX and UI, go to. Is it which way around is it? Is it Norman Nielsen or Nielsen Norman? Doesn't matter.
NNgroup.com.
NN Group. Yeah.
I think it's Nielsen. No, I'm going to confuse myself.
Matter.
That one.
But the URL is NN Group anyway. Yeah.
Okay.
So, one thing I would urge you not to do is spend.
No. You stop there, because like now, like you're not going to leave anything for us.
No. But just one.
Because I wanted to now list things like places you shouldn't go.
Oh, okay. Well, go ahead. Yeah. Let's see if you steal mine.
Okay. Jeez, man, why do I always have to say the inflammatory stuff? But man, there's some bad stuff on medium.com. Like whenever I read anything meaningful or interesting on medium.com, I am just like, wow, this is actually really interesting for something that's on medium.com. But yeah, I hope Jen didn't want to say medium.com. But man, there's so many bad takes there. And
Yeah.
like some days I feel like maybe it was better when you at the very least needed to know a bit of HTML in order to get a blog up. I'm not sure whether like the accessibility of something like medium.com is kind of good for the craft at large. There's so many bad takes. But there's one that I always see come up, and that's the one like designing a better login screen. And it's like instead of telling a user that the credentials were invalid, tell them whether the password or the email was wrong. Don't just tell them something like, I'm like there's a reason why you do that. There's a reason there's a reason why you do that. Do you want all your users' emails to get scraped by a bot? And to me, that is one of the I would like for us to also maybe at some point stop and talk about what we mean when we say product design, because there's probably some variation in terms of what that means to us, all three of us. But I do think a lot of it is, like everyone's an expert. Everyone thinks, oh, I know what a good website looks like. So I know, and I think there's this misconception that like product design, interaction design, all these things are effectively about strong opinions instead of actual practices and facilitation. And you should be some type of, oracle that kind of devise buttons are the best solution here, or whatever. It's like, yeah. I don't want to go too much into that, but I think maybe that can serve of two examples. Maybe just in general, be careful about what you read. There's a lot of bad stuff out there. At the very least, try, Justin mentioned Smashing Magazine. Their book publishing arm is amazing. They have stuff on like privacy. They have stuff on like there's this phenomenal one called Click as well, which is about like really goes into kind of like anti-patterns, but also like anti-patterns. It's interesting. It has a very kind of neat, like interesting approach to anti-patterns beyond just don't do them. There's also like accessibility, like Hayden Pickering, a lot of great publishers on Smashing. So definitely, at the very least, books have an editor who needs to, at the very least, go like, this is insane, like this doesn't make any sense. Whereas if you're just publishing random stuff on Medium, you don't necessarily have that. Okay, that is my tip, is more in terms of be careful what you read, as opposed to deliberately. I think it's more important to stay away from certain things than to actually pursue specific things. But Jen, I'm curious what your recommendations would be.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm very curious what you think about UX Collective now after you said that. But what I was going to say is finding industry leaders that you admire. And if they are an industry leader, they most likely have a newsletter of some kind. And I'm a newsletter gal. And I think that's also nice because it comes with that personal take and anecdotal accounts of things that have happened that you can learn from. But I have another answer that I'm almost certain you won't like, but maybe the younger listeners might appreciate, because doom scrolling is a thing. And something to combat that I've done is I have a UX specific Instagram account and TikTok account, but I'm off TikTok now, but like having accounts that aren't your personal ones, but you're just going through the UX hashtags. There's a lot of crap, like, don't get me wrong, but I think there's some little nuggets of gold every now and then. I think young people might appreciate consuming it in that way, short form. And then last thing, also apparently Twitter is like a UX hub. My boyfriend follows some great UX people on there, so definitely checking out
I assume.
X.
Formerly known as Twitter.
Right. Yeah, I need to get into the habit of that. yeah, that's what I would say.
Great, thank you.
I think the key thing here, and something that I very much relate with, is instead of maybe like find people and find people whose thoughts align with your own.
Yeah.
Because
yeah.
I do think like product design is such a diverse field that there's this plurality of approaches. And this isn't me being diplomatic. As mentioned, like I tend to be more inflammatory than diplomatic. But I do think like this is such a big field that it's very hard for a single person or a single group of people to really get a handle on everything that is covered under this massive umbrella. So like I think even between Justin and myself, we have some differences of opinions. And it's just like there's just so much almost wiggle room. So don't like if you don't agree with the stuff that someone says, like, or they don't resonate with you, that's not necessarily a bad sign. Like, it might just their lens that they're looking at product design through might be something that's hard for you to reconcile in terms of how you look at product design, and that's fine. But obviously you want to follow reputable people. A good sign is if someone has at least published a book. That's generally a good sign. Or if they have a hiss, or I think at the very least another thing as well, is I don't necessarily want to do like the whole appeal to authority thing, but if someone has worked at like Spotify, or they've worked at Microsoft, or they've worked at, and that's not because that's some type of sanction and now they're knighted into the temple of product design, but at the very least a big company that has a lot on the line has said, we are going to trust this person. And like when you're working at that scale, putting your trust in someone isn't something you just like willy-nilly do. Okay, so at the very least, like there's some big forces that say, okay, your approach makes sense. But more often than not, I think it's one of those things where you need to figure out kind of your own approach. You need to figure out the people that you resonate with and rather follow those people instead of just randomly going on, So it's the same here with you, like you mentioned UX Collective. And I think the thing is with UX Collective as well, it's like, I don't know, like, would I just go and read UX Collective? Probably not. But do I follow people that publish on UX Collective whose stuff that I really enjoy? Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. Like, I think be careful. Even the Smashing Magazine stuff and so forth, it's not necessarily that there's bad stuff on Smashing Magazine or whatever, but there's stuff that's maybe not related to the type of stuff you're doing. Maybe there's like a super in-depth article on like WebSockets and whatever, and that's something you're never going to touch in your life or whatever. So don't just like consume stuff randomly and think it's applicable or relevant or good even. Kind of try every day. It's a slow journey. You kind of almost curate your own reading list.
Yeah.
But I think that's something you need to proactively do. And not just like read random stuff that people say about product design. Like I wouldn't just go. It's to me like the same as just going on Reddit and reading a random thread and basing my viewpoints on that, or whatever. I don't know. But yeah, some great stuff. Justin, do you have anything to add to that?
I just wanted to add one more thing to avoid, and that's places like Dribbble. Yeah.
Oh yes. Oh yes.
You go on there and that's not product design in the way that we really are thinking about it in terms of building interfaces and things like that. It's a showcase of what what people can do in Figma rather than what they can do for a real use case. I guarantee like 95% of the stuff on Dribbble will never get built.
And can't be built physically.
And can't be built, yeah.
Yes,
and it's also like can be a demoralizing experience. Because you go on there and you're like, look at this design with these animations this person's done. I can't do that, whatever. And it's quite a demoralizing thing. And we shouldn't take that as what's actually happening in the world of work.
Yes. So I think it's also
it's not a real representation of what you might do in your job. Yeah.
One thing I always tell my students is don't look at pictures of UI design product design. Look at actual sites. Look at actual
Yes.
products. Because the people that are building real things out there that are meaningful and significant are probably doing that behind an NDA, or they're not allowed to say they worked on this, or it's being white papered. So by definition, the stuff you find online is student work or practice work. And that's the paradox. When you Google, and I always tell my students this, when you Google user persona, the first couple of things you see look unlike any user persona I've ever seen in my life. I'm like, that thing took 3 days to design. And yeah, and I'm like, and okay, and you're like, okay, Skulk, but like, why is that bad? Okay, well, here's why it's bad. What if you realize that, like, oh, this user actually doesn't make sense?
Yes.
Like now already
value whatsoever. Yeah.
You'll be like, you're not gonna also like, I just see the craziest stuff. It's like, I don't know, like to me, like the wireframes, user personas, all those things, the uglier they are, the better. Because you should not, they should be like easily disposable.
Malleable.
But anyway,
you're not precious about it. Mm-hmm.
Yes,
exactly,
they're like a sketch on the back of a napkin.
Yeah. And at some point, with those kinds of investigations and things, you're going to get rid of a lot of it. It's going to be wasted. And if you're spending 3 days making your persona look nice in your Figma file, and then as Scott says, oh no, that's out of the window now. That's 3 wasted days.
You could have spent 3 days building the actual product. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I
have this amazing persona design
and tested it.
Yeah, exactly. So okay, but if I in short, if I want to summarize my views on this, don't look at pictures or things. Don't go I don't say there isn't a place for this. I myself have a Dribble account. Don't really use it much nowadays. I have a Beyonce account as well, but that's mostly just actually for my illustration work and actual exhibitions and stuff. But I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. I think it's something that I would maybe reasonably expect someone to have if they're applying for a job, at the very least have. And also have it be, don't just have images. Explain to me what you did, what decisions you made, and so forth. And just upload images. I often joke and I say that you get these Beyonce or Dribble things where it's like, cool, okay, I can see wireframes were created. Okay, I can see some mock-ups were made. Oh, here's the final product. You've literally now explained to me how to design an interface. You haven't told me anything about what decisions you made during that. But anyway, I think for me, the key is just spend more time looking at actual products. Look at apps, download apps, play around with apps, take screenshots of apps, build out a repository of screenshots of things that you take for yourself for reference, but base those on actual working products, not on actual pictures of designs. And also a working product, you can drag your browser around. You can see how does it actually respond. If I zoom in, zoom out. If I change from dark mode to light mode, you can actually experience and see the product side and not just a picture of the product. That would be my main advice. Yeah.
Just related to that, Jenna, you shared this a pattern library, I assume.
Yeah, Mobbin is what it's called. And yeah, exactly what you guys are saying about real screens that have been built compared to pictures. Mobbin allows you to search for developed apps or websites by category or by pattern. And I think that's great for finding the product. And then, like Skulk says, actually download the app or open the website and see how it responds. But it's great. I love Mobbin when I just want to be reminded of a certain flow. Like you'd search checkout, and then it's just all the checkout flows of all the leading apps. So
I say that's way more useful than.
Yeah, I actually have my own repository, Google Drive thing, that I just have, I open up like Adobe Bridge, and I just have things like tagged or whatever, and I'm like, cool,
Yeah.
wizard or whatever. Cool. Okay, here's some examples of wizards, or tooltips or whatever. Yeah, like I think you start building out your own internal, storehouse of
Yes.
kind of things that you reference and so forth.
Your toolbox. No, definitely.
Okay, I think we've.
Geez, we still need to talk about courses.
We're going to have to move on, I'm afraid. We can share the resources and links and everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
But part of that question is what courses.
Thank you to Josh.
Yes.
It's Nielsen Norman Group.
Yes.
Nice.
Mike says we should be getting our viewpoints from Reddit. And that life is all about Flash. Yeah. So Mike is disagreeing.
Like don't get
ironic
product.
way.
Don't get product design stuff on Reddit, but get general life advice on Reddit. You can't go wrong. Like, you should base your life decisions on Reddit. Yeah, not product design.
So different roles. So we got 4 questions related to this, and I think they're all interesting ones we can tackle. Why a product designer in the first place? What's the difference between a product designer and a UX designer? What's the difference between a product designer and a UX UI designer? Why make the jump to product design? So these are all related. So what are our thoughts on this? What product design versus UI UX design? Are they different? How do they differ? Are we doing the same thing every time? Thoughts?
Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I would love to jump in here, but I don't want to be the one who's just bullhorning straight into all the topics. But let me just put it this way to maybe get the people going. So generally, when I started a group of students, I first thing I ask is what is product design? And no one can really answer. And I'm like, okay, cool. But you've actually, it's not product design. Generally it would be interaction design or whatever, whatever course I'm teaching. And no one would be able to answer. And I'd be like, okay, but you literally committed to doing this thing for 3 years and getting a degree in it, but you can't really tell me what it actually even is. But I think that's not but what I'm trying to prove there is that you can be very hard pressed for anyone to give you a really solid definition without some hand wavy stuff. And then generally my second slide is that slide from Blades of Glory, where it's I don't know what it means, but it gets the people going, and that's product design effectively. It's it makes people angry, it gets people to fight, but I don't really know what it means. I can unpack what it means for me, but yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
Maybe I could answer this from a career progression standpoint. But yeah, take what I say with a grain of salt, as there are interpretations. But I mean, when I started, my title was UX UI designer, junior UX designer, UX UI designer. And as I gained more experience and started leading projects, the title sort of at some point changed to product. I think when I started becoming involved with product related decisions with various stakeholders in the company. And I think maybe that's one way to think about it, is you're thinking about business goals and the whole life of the product. Whereas UX, UI, while you're a product designer, you're employing UX, UI principles, in your work. And so another way I think about it is if I'm just working on a website, and that's, I guess, also why web design might be its own categories. I wouldn't call web design product design necessarily, because websites often are, a landing spot to get people to sign up for a product, right? And so I think you're exercising UX UI while you're designing web, but you don't have your product hat on. You're not talking to the various stakeholders. So let me know what you guys think about that take.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree with that. Then I think the product term definitely comes much more into play when you're thinking about something in a larger sense than doing the term you used earlier, the pixel pushing, for want of a better phrase, or researching the users or creating the personas or whatever you might be doing. It's more of a holistic approach to that. I don't like that word, holistic, but I can't think of a better one.
You're more instrumental in the direction that
That's a
takes.
great term. Yeah. So you're making decisions on how something as a whole is guided, rather than what should our focus state on that input look like, or what happens when the user clicks on this modal, or is our app failing because they don't know what to do with it? Those are very different considerations, I think.
Questions. And when I think back on starting out, when I was just a UX UI designer, those projects most likely had a product owner that was making the product related decisions, and I was just executing on the decisions that he or she made. And so now, that's also an interesting thing, is when you have a product designer and a product owner on the same project, how much do they overlap and stuff? But we'll not get into that right now. But Schalk, what do you, or Justin?
So can I just jump in with one more thing, Schalk?
Sure.
I also think we get bogged down in titles a bit in this industry. We don't even want to talk about software development titles. And
solutions architect, that's me right there.
There you go. Chief solutions architect.
I can architect you some damn solutions.
Chiefly you can, yeah. So we also do get a little bit bogged down in that, I think. And when we are referring to a UI designer, but what if that person is also doing UX, because a lot of people do both. Yeah. And Schalk and I both, we've had this discussion many times. We both think that UI designers should be doing UX anyway. So then so titles can, I think they can be a little bit of a red herring sometimes, and we shouldn't put too much stock in them. But we should be defining what roles are in terms of what are your day-to-day responsibilities in that particular position, no matter what the title might be.
And I often say this as well, is like I have very strong feelings about that. Titles and role and positions mean nothing outside a specific company or specific team. Often. So I'm theoretically the CEO of Schalk Venter Pty Ltd. Well, not theoretically, I am. But so what I do is very different from what the CEO of Google or Microsoft does. So you have titles that do completely different things, and even in some especially one thing that I do find kind of is this term UX designer is probably the most squishy. You just find it can basically mean anything. It's what's it, Aurora Sketch? What's the inkblot stuff? Yes, my Afrikaans is kind of showing through a bit. But it's I don't know. To me, the only reason why you would really care about titles is either for pissing matches or gatekeeping, and you're you're not a real product designer or whatever. So I don't know, I don't find that useful. And I also find that with specifically stuff like product design and so forth, I do find generally it's a position that sits at an intersection. It's and the places where I find it most often is what you described, Jenna, and probably what you do yourself, which is kind of somewhere between effectively a business analyst with a bit of a visual slant and with a certain sensibility, a visual sensibility. And then the other place where I find it like people who call themselves product designers sit as well, is kind of at a much more system-based kind of design position. So not making mock-ups or whatever, but thinking system-wide in terms of, what are the components? How do the components relate to one another? How do these components get shared between our web version of the product and our kind of specific operating systems? And, and what are the performance implications? We can do this specific effect or whatever, but it's not going to work on on iOS, or it's going to be really slow on Android, and kind of those type of decisions, So thinking more like about like when you think about a product, it's almost like you kind of have your and I hate to invoke the guy because I feel invoking him brings more trouble than it's worth when talking about design. But you have your Steve Jobs, and then you have your kind of your Wozniaks as well, which is a bit more like thinking about a product more from an engineering perspective, and that's still design. In the same way that someone who designs a car, is probably more in tune with the engineering side of things than maybe the strategic business related side of things. So, it depends. So I generally find that's kind of the intersections where this product design role is. And sometimes people start out kind of a bit in the middle, with just general visual sensibilities. But I do find with time people start moving into one of those directions. Either they start moving more into the strategic side of things, or more into the kind of the engineering product design side of things. But yeah, it's I think at the very least I like this notion of speaking more about product design, and we can maybe take a second to talk about like kind of what is industrial design and how does this relate to industrial design and all that stuff. But I do appreciate us moving away from this idea of purely designing experience. I'm not a big fan of kind of UX and all those things, and this is purely subjective because I do think like experience is a side effect of the reality and the materials and the constraints that you're working in. You can optimize an experience. I don't think you can start from the perspective of designing an experience. I can't be that I'm going to design something that's on the level of watching an IMAX movie if I just have a cell phone that can take like a 3 megabyte video or whatever, So I don't start from what is the experience. I start and I optimize the experience. But once again, now we're kind of having semantic fights and whatever, and I actually want to avoid those type of things. But I think it's helpful for oneself to be able to make sense of what it is that you're doing, because I do find for myself, like, and Justin yourself as well probably, and Jen probably you as well, is you get drawn to specific types of work. There are specific types of work that you somehow end up really good at and you really enjoy, and you can't really say why, but you just get drawn to those type of work. And then later on you start developing the language in terms of being able to talk about it through these terms. You don't look at the terms and be like, which one of these do I want to become? And if I want to become that one, how do I do that? Like, there's an inherent slipperiness in all these terms, and they're only useful in terms of describing what we already do, and some meaningful way to talk about what is different from what I do to what Justin does and what Jen does, and so forth. Yes, there's also some great questions in the comments, Justin, so you can bring them up as well if you want. But I'm also curious whether you guys have anything to add to that.
No, I think sorry, Jen, go ahead.
No, I mean, I don't want to like ramble on because I think you mentioned quite a lot.
I've got that covered. Don't worry about it. The rambling, I've got us covered.
We'll take care of that, guys.
Yeah, I've cornered the market on rambling. Don't even try.
Rambling, your expertise. No. Same. It's a Fenker thing. But I wanted to point out what you were saying about that split. It does mirror the one question about becoming a principal designer versus becoming a design team manager. I think a lot of people in their career face that decision, and it happened to me. I didn't want to necessarily manage a team. I just loved working in Figma, and I became good at it. And so then I wanted to be a contractor and do just that. So just to quickly answer that last question, it's definitely possible. I don't know, can you call it being technically strong as a designer? Yeah, like you focus more on the technical than the strategic side. So that was one thing I wanted to say. But then also that split between UX UI, I don't want to open a can of worms, but I did just want to mention when I was at Specno, there was a time where they had asked the team, do you guys want to specialize in either? And at the time, I think I would have picked UI because I am more of a visual kind of person. But yeah, I am of the belief that you'll just be better off if you can do both. And imagining joining a project only at the UI phase, right? Like missing out on all the research and the ideation to just, apply the UI, which I have another take on that, which is not just changing the colors and the font, but you know what I'm saying? Like to be involved from 0 to 1, just makes you a stronger designer. You can make component-based decisions with the context from the research. So absolutely, I don't think specializing in either is the way to go. I think you should be both. And you should learn a bit of, that's what I'm inspired from you guys. I think you should also learn a bit of front end as well to make you a better designer. So yeah.
John Maria, I kind of like his approach where, he says people get asked all the time. So he has a phenomenal book called, what's it called? Like Speaking Machine or something.
How to Speak.
It's a phenomenal book. And so I like his approach. He says he gets asked quite a lot in terms of whether you should, should designers be able to code? And I like his approach where he's like you don't need to understand programming. What you do need to understand is computing. Okay, because the material that you're working with is computing. You're not working with code, but the concrete material you're working with is computing. So you need to understand ideas about latency and like what does it mean if the database is in Ireland? What does it mean, if this, what can be saved on the device? What cannot be saved on the device? Basically, the same thing I said about this login screen thing where everyone's like, no, you should tell the user if the email is wrong or the password is wrong. Like that makes sense to you if you don't understand basic computing. You don't understand where are usernames and passwords saved? How do you keep them secure? Like what are actual things that can happen to your username when you say like someone's account got hacked? What does that mean? How does that happen? So I think, to me, that's becoming more and more a non-negotiable. If you want to work in software, you need to understand basic computing principles. You don't need to understand code. I know a lot of people who can code who don't understand basic computing. But they can do scripting. They can get you the button to animate or whatever. But if you're building a software product, you need to understand the material that is software. And also things around and scale. And I almost want to say, we're talking about UX, UI, all those things. I think there's a lot of really interesting kind of subdivisions happening in the world of product interface design, whatever this thing is. And I think a very interesting space is kind of this idea of designing at scale. And that's a very specific set of skills that have very little to do with how nice can you make a button look or how good can you make an experience. How do you design something that scales really well across, so for example, something like Salesforce, so they have, I think also Facebook, I think I heard Dan Abramov mention one time, Justin, I think they have I think I almost want to say they have more than 10,000 React components, different components. How do you design when you can't physically look at every single thing? Because the scale of what design is just so big. You need to almost design with general decisions without being able to look at every specific example of a button or whatever. That's really interesting. So, but I also just want to note, so I obviously UI, UX, all these things, obviously they exist. But I think what I'm not a big fan of is building your career on scoping your career to something that is a UI or UX. I think that is a field and it's a practice that several roles actually touch on. Like, I genuinely believe most people in a software organization should have a good grasp on UX. It shouldn't just be someone's job. And I also think a lot why these things are becoming harder and harder to answer is because just how much kind of we're moving to a more cross-functional world, where you don't have your UX team and your UX and your UI team and your coding team and your management team and your research team and your marketing team. So it's also very hard when you don't have those levels of division of labor to say, I just do this specific thing and then I hand it off to someone else.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Jen, on those. Is there anything
I'll
else
try
that
and keep it shorter, guys. Sorry.
No,
I
that
just
was
have a lot
great.
of thoughts.
I'm like taking notes here, so.
Oh, thanks.
So yeah, in terms of career growth and progression, I mean, this is a very hard thing to answer. It's quite specifically organizational in its nature. Yeah. I think what you covered already, Jen, about being a principal designer, is definitely something that exists in the same way that you might have a software a tech lead or something like that on a team. But in a larger organization, you're not going to find it in a startup or something like that, probably. Yeah. Also, I think in South Africa specifically, design roles are very poorly defined, and career paths, even in large organizations. In terms of design, there doesn't seem to be, and I'm talking here, product design, UI design, UX, etc. I mean, my
well, I would say software in general. Like,
true. Yeah.
If I'm applying for a JavaScript position in South Africa, chances are I'm going to have to write some jQuery on a PHP website.
More than likely.
Yeah. So it's like I don't want to get too much into that, but there's a bit also like of a brain drain happening and whatever. So all the good product designers are working for international companies, and you guys can probably connect the dots. Yeah.
Yes, I mean one of my senior designers left us because she can work from her home in Bloberg for a company in the US and triple her salary.
Yeah.
So that's definitely those are different, completely different concerns. Yeah, so I mean there is that career path, but I mean you either become me, where you're a manager, as Jen said, or you
become a consultant. Yeah.
Or you become a consultant. I think those are the options.
Yeah.
In South Africa,
like in software in general, coding.
Yeah.
I do more coding nowadays than I do design, and like there's definitely like a point where you have to decide: am I gonna become a freelancer, or am I gonna work at a company and become a manager?
Yeah. I mean,
that's a very definitive point where you have to make that decision. Yeah.
So I mean, if I can perhaps just speak from my point of view, and because these are things that I actually manage and put in place and things like that. I mean, our company is fairly small. We're around 60 people, but we have very, very well defined, and we spend a lot of time working on defined career paths for every individual. So we have general.
There's a link to it. It's public, is it not?
It's public, yes.
Yes, I shared with my students.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I shared with my students. Also,
not everything is finished yet, though.
Well, that's what makes it so great. Bleeding edge, early access. I don't know if you're familiar. Sorry, I'm interrupting you now, but like I just thought about it and I'm going to forget. Are you familiar with Sarah Drasner's career ladders stuff?
Yes.
Is there something there about design as well? I often send that to my more like software students. That also has some great stuff. I'll Google it quickly.
Yeah, I mean, our stuff is all public. You can check it out. It's just docs.nml.co.za, and you'll see our career paths on there. But yeah, so that's very well defined in my organization. But that's because we spend so much time working on it.
Yeah.
And you're not always going to encounter that. You might, seniority could just become, oh, you've been there for 10 years, we better give you a promotion or whatever it might be. And often, and in small organizations, you're unlikely to get that kind of career path in design. It's a very unfortunate thing. Yeah. I mean, you can go and work for like Booking.com. Booking.com. I mean, they have like 350 designers, I think, and you can go and work for a place like that, and you'll have a defined career path, but you'll spend 5 years working on one button. So there are all sorts of pros and cons to these things. Management, leadership. If you don't want that, then like a senior consulting kind of role is probably the kind of thing to pursue.
Also, something that kind of sits in between that is also like I think there's not enough of a emphasis and discourse on kind of this idea of design as facilitation as well. And I think like that is something that adds a lot of value. And it's not necessarily a managerial position. You can still do that as a consulting thing. But so that's more like, hey, we don't know what we want or how to get there, or our CEO wants the button to be purple, but like his wife thinks it should be green and whatever, and like bringing someone into that and being like, cool, facilitating that process, being like, okay, cool, trying to get people. I almost want to say, like it's the grossest analogy, but like kind of almost like a scrum master for design, in the same way that a scrum master kind of facilitates the agile process. I definitely have two people in mind that kind of do that type of thing. Liz would be one of them, who used to be at DVT, and so forth. And that's very much more like design, facilitating the process of design, instead of being like, I'm going to sit down on my computer and make design happen now. Like you almost don't do that much design yourself, if at all, but you facilitate the team through this process of design, and you kind of anchor them and kind of guide them and get them to ask the right questions and so forth. And I think that's also something that's not like kind of discussed enough, because it's much harder. Like, how do you get good at that? And how do you get good at that? Just making a lot of mistakes, messing up really badly, and then being like, guys, you shouldn't do this thing because I did it at one point and I know where this is going. Like, don't argue whether the button should be green or purple. Like, I've been there. Here's a better way. But that's just experience. I think a lot of people do that thing where they read up a ton and they think if they can say like, oh, the law of this, the law of that, and Neil Jacobs' law, what's it, the 7 9 less more magic number. Like, there's actually that thing. What is it? It's less than 7, more than 9. I can never remember the thing. But it's about like cognitive load and so forth. But like, if you can just memorize all these things, then like, you can be like, ooh, and like, that's so useless. Like it comes from experience.
Right. Okay. I'm going to move the slides.
Okay. Next topic.
Challenges and solutions. Okay. Biggest problems that we face. A challenge of being a product designer in South Africa. I think we touched on that a little bit already, and then how do you deal with
exchange rate? No, legit.
How do you deal with creative block? Oof. And picking battles. When is it worth taking on that fight?
Those are good questions.
Good questions. Okay.
It's easy. If it comes from business, they're wrong. If it comes from engineering, you're wrong. Yeah.
If it comes from marketing, they're doubly wrong.
But my snarky, my facetious answer would be depend. Like, whether a battle is worth fighting is how much input does that person have over you getting paid your salary at the end of the month.
I mean, Scott, I know you're being facetious, but that's actually a valid concern.
Yeah, like no, for sure.
You know, yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
um,
how
yeah,
far can
like
I push this idea against the wishes of someone who has power over me? It's a horrible
Yeah.
situation to be in.
Yeah.
Um,
Like, and this is the thing about anti-patterns as
yeah,
well. Like,
yeah,
it's almost never designers that do anti-patterns.
no,
So, like, we're kind of preaching to the choir if we're like, you shouldn't, like, this is bad. You shouldn't mislead your users. Like,
mm,
more often than not, that's coming down the wire from higher up.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
but Jane, I'm actually curious to hear your thoughts on kind of picking battles and so forth, purely because I think Justin and I are kind of in more established positions. So, more often than not, it's people fighting with us instead of us picking fight with other people. So, I'm curious, kind of for
Yeah.
you, who's a bit newer in the field, what your experience is with this.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think as I'm finding my feet, there's this, because I get imposter syndrome, and I'm like, oh, can I really be that shift from being an employee to now being this, consulting expert that has to now that dynamic is completely different, and so I need to have more confidence in my decisions. I'm fortunate that my clients are pretty trusting, but there's definitely cases where, they're really adamant about this one thing. And, I'm falling back on experience thinking, oh no, I know this isn't the right way. But, if you can, I'd say that if there's an ability to test both options, right? Like do an A/B test, that's like a pretty fail-proof thing. Like if the users, take to that solution or not. I think we had it once where it was like, okay, let's just try. We'll launch this version for a week. We'll launch the other one. So I think that's great if it could be validated by users, right? Like test the two different options. But yeah, in terms of other picking your battles, I mean, also, yeah, how much of an effect is it? Is it a big deal? Because also designers are a bit perfectionistic, and I think there is an art of like detachment that needs to happen. Like, okay, like it's not the end of the world if like this is a bit skew or if this is like the wrong color. Like the product works, right? So I think we also need to check ourselves if we're a bit perfectionistic. Yeah, that's what I would say. If research can help us pick the battle. Yeah, always like outsource. It's not what I say. It's what the research says, or it's what.
Yeah. That's a great answer. Thanks. I also think when you're getting pushback from devs, you need to take that into account, but you also need to gauge, is the dev pushing back because this is a bad decision from a user point of view, or is the dev pushing back because it's going to add, 2 days story or whatever it might be.
Yeah, what kind of pushback is this? What is the root? Understanding where the point of contention is rooted. That's actually a really good point, because that's super valid. If a dev is like, no, let's have it be. I have an interesting story that comes to mind when it comes to we were working on an app for managing a soccer team, and it was a first-time founder. They wanted to get investment, so we designed this beautiful field, like it was green with the grass, and there were little plus signs to assign the players to their positions, and it looked great. But then it went through a technical assessment, and the devs were like, "Listen, if you just make a list, like adding the names, that will take me one day. Compared to this soccer field, cropping their avatars, like that's gonna take 2 weeks." So it's like that's their perspective, but then you have the client that's like, no, I really want to wow the investor. It's like, okay, then you need to make decisions like, let's put this in the pitch deck. That's for one scenario. Our MVP can be the basic list. We'll have a phased approach. So yeah, that's a great point as well, Justin. Why is there this pushback? Yeah.
Honestly, I think so for me, most of it, I'm just going to say it, most of it is waterfall. That's your problem. Like most of it is
as well.
Most of it is because stakeholders aren't part of the decision. And what I've actually found a lot, having worked kind of as a designer and as a developer, on projects, is a lot of times, like the designer themselves, myself including, is not actually even that sold on that specific solution. But so and they don't mind really doing it another way. It's just like, cool,
Yeah.
like let's give this a try. And I think a lot of times what I've found is that devs don't, because I think also some devs kind of measure themselves in terms of how faithfully can they implement the thing. They almost see it as a puzzle, but yeah, like I don't know, like it's like you also need to think about, like, is someone going to be able to maintain this thing 3 years from now? You know, are you going to change the color of this button and half the site is going to explode? But a lot of times what I found is when you have these like very waterfall processes, is design decisions get made and then it gets handed to the devs, and the devs just implement it, and it takes them 3 days because it's a very strange thing, like as you mentioned, you know, like the grass and the
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
And if the designer knew that, they'd be like, no, I wasn't even that. I don't have that strong feelings
Doesn't
about
have
it.
to
I'm
be
happy
fast.
to.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think honestly,
Yeah.
most of this can be solved by just working in a cross-functional manner, working together as a team, and not dividing your labor in that manner where you're throwing things over the wall.
Yeah.
So there are those type of
There's a
discussions.
link to the Figma file. Off you go. Is a recipe for
Yes.
these kinds of issues.
Yes. And luckily, you know, like this is not something new. This is something that, you know, people have been talking about this since what, like early 2000s. Literally just Google Agile Manifesto. You know, like I have to also, yeah, there's a lot of cargo cult agile out there as well, where people might be like, yeah, but Skulk, we are an agile organization, but you know, that's how it, like, I don't even want to get into those discussions, you know, like
Yeah, no, let's not.
Gideon calls them Wagile, which I really appreciate.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got some questions later on about collaboration, so maybe we can just
Yes.
that
Sorry,
discussion.
and maybe just I think one place to demarcate this is you get those type of things, but then you also get picking battles that are based on principle. You know, and
Yes.
now you're getting into the
Those are
realm of
different,
like
yeah.
anti-patterns and, you know, deceptive things and wording of things and accessibility, you know, like at what point do you say that this looks amazing and a more accessible solution is going to look a bit more mundane and dull, because plot twist, things that are straightforward and predictable are easier to use in general. Like, how do you fight those battles? And those are the tough ones. Yeah. So maybe, Justin, I'm curious quickly if you can just quickly mention something on in terms of that, like when it comes to principles, how do you kind of approach those?
So this can be a really tricky one. I mean, I'll use an example from my work life without naming anyone. We were working with a company, and they wanted to do something that we considered extremely unethical, which was if people just started filling in a form without even submitting it to collect their data. And we pushed back crazily against that. But it got to the point where we actually had to go, we don't want to work with you anymore.
Wow.
So you've got to have certain guiding principles that are non-negotiable in your work life, I think. Yeah. And I mean, I know it's really easy to say that, right? From a position of privilege of, hey, always stick by your principles. Sometimes you need to pay your rent, and eat and feed the cat or whatever it might be. Yeah. So it becomes very sticky when you get into those situations. I mean, I was fortunate enough to be working in a company where we could do that. So I don't have an easy answer for this when it does come to those kinds of ethical questions. It's really easy to say, always do the right thing, but what does that mean for you personally? Because you aren't responsible for the state of the world as an individual, So it's a very difficult thing to answer, Skalk. I don't have a good answer. Yeah.
I honestly think, for me personally, I think we should destigmatize a lot of this stuff. And we should speak more openly about it and kind of own a lot of that stuff. I can say for a fact this week, there's a specific thing that I'm thinking about. There's an instance this week where I made a decision to make something less accessible because of certain factors.
Wow.
Where I had a decision and I was like, this approach would be more accessible. This one would be less accessible. And because of deadlines, or because of like I just didn't have the energy to go down this path and have all these discussions.
Yeah.
Like this week, there was a very specific. So I think we need to also be open about this in terms of we're trying our best, and how
Yeah.
do we become more principled, and not necessarily as if there's like a threshold where now you're designing from a place of principle and place of not principle,
And not,
and
yeah.
that might differ for people. Like
No,
someone might be fine doing a landing page for a tobacco company. Someone else might say like that's not the stuff they type of things they want to work on, or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Cool.
It's a lot easier when you have institutional support. To
Yes.
make those kinds of stances.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. But I
without
do.
As an individual, it's very, very difficult.
And I do think, sorry?
No, you have to let certain things guide you, and as you say, I mean, we have to admit also that we've done something that maybe with institutional support behind us we wouldn't have done.
Yes.
And that's not a stick to beat ourselves with. It's a reality of the world, and these kinds of environments that we are forced to work in.
Yeah.
I don't want to get all Trotskyite, but
yeah, like like we're heading into some deep sought territory right now.
Yeah, we'll leave that out of it. But yeah, it's I don't have a good answer, is what I'm saying.
But paradoxically, before we maybe move on to the next things, I also do think like in some ways where like being a like having a lot of principles in terms of your approach to design sometimes makes it harder. In some manners, it makes it easier as well. Like especially when you think about what are we trying to do here, and seeking that alignment. So whenever I find myself in a situation where it's like, oh, the button should be green or purple or whatever, I'm like, generally that's a symptom of kind of bigger things at play here. And I think for me, the first thing I try and do when I find myself in some type of design capacity is figure out what do the people that I work with want, and what do I want, and where does that overlap? Because the pure fact that they're paying you money to be here means that there is an acknowledgement that there's something they want you to make better or help with. And figuring out what that is, I think also when you align yourself in that realm, like then you also tend to have a lot less discussions around, no, this way, that way, this way. And I think this is the hardest thing for me, is like but it's something you cultivate in a team. It's almost like a shared curiosity. And it's, and I also find it helpful to ask more questions than provide answers. Even if I know, so let's say someone wants to make a button yellow, a piece of text yellow, okay? Or they want to remove an outline from a button or whatever. And, I find it much more useful to go like, okay, cool. But, all right, so what if you have bad vision? How like do you think that will play a role? Like, do you think like that will influence it? And okay, but whatever. Okay, but what if you are outside and you have really bad glare on your phone? Would a yellow button be frustrating or whatever? And I think also what I found is to accept those answers. Like when someone is like, yeah, like I don't think we need to worry about that. Sometimes you don't need to challenge them on that. And I think that is where we need to like kind of talk about this thing once again, that like we're here to do a job. When I do a lot of volunteer work, I do a lot of personal projects there, like I can exercise kind of my own what I want to do to its fullest, but someone is paying you money to come and at the very least surface those things. Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? And if they are like, I don't know, this is once again, like I would draw this line at different places, but I want to try and stay away from this kind of relationship where I'm like, we should do this, we should do that, we should do this. And more in terms of playing more a role in terms of opening up things that might not have been considered and having discussions on that. And I think also that also is much more easier to prove the value you provide than to just be like, I tell them what to design. But yeah. Cool, let's move on. Sorry, Jenna, do you want to add to that?
While you were speaking, I was thinking how that relates to the creative block question. Maybe I'm like trying to bring two things together that might not be related, but I mean, I think that's the beautiful thing about this discipline compared to other more creative forms, not creative, but traditional forms of design. Like we're not expressing ourselves. It's not like I'm painting something and I'm staring at a blank canvas. I don't know what story I want to tell.
It's like very dangerous words, and it's very surprising that those are dangerous words for some people. But yeah, 100% agree. 100% agree.
In this discipline, I mean, I think when you remember that you're solving a specific problem outside of yourself and you're attacking it from these different avenues of like, okay, principally, how can I look at this problem? Or business-wise, how can I look at this problem? Or if you're like looking at something and your initial knowledge doesn't answer the question, I think that's a nice way to deal with creative block. Like, okay, let me change my perspective. So yeah, I like what you were saying now.
There was an actual question. At what point, I don't know if you can find that question, at what point do you have to sacrifice personal taste for practicality?
Yes.
I don't know if you can find that one. I think that's a great one. And I don't like the fact that like just my hair sticks out like whenever I come on screen. But yeah, I don't know. Like for me, real talk, personal taste has no real place in product design. And I'm saying this as someone who has a postgrad, has a master's degree in visual arts, so I'm all about painting and illustration and stuff. But like I sometimes do think that sometimes I wonder whether we would be better suited for viewing product design more under an engineering umbrella and less under a creative umbrella. I sometimes think lumping product design into all the other creative fields is maybe not doing it a lot of justice, because more often than not you have a piece of wood, you have a stone, and you have some masking tape, and you need to build something with that. That's much more what product design is like, as opposed to having a blank canvas. Yeah. And for some people that's very freeing. I think for myself it's very freeing, because thinking about style as a tool, the way you would design a product for kids compared to a product for people who work like a medical product, compared to how you like the style decisions you would make compared to like some software as a service, or and I think like that is the thing that I oftentimes find missing as well, is not thinking about style as a tool. Style is a tool you use. And it's we have very weird ideas about like plagiarism, and I don't even want to get into all of that. Like, like, yeah, I don't know.
Well, I think it's
I don't have
great.
energy to even unpack that. But
Limitations, yeah, are just great for design, right? I mean, it's the
Mm.
more
Yes.
interesting solutions come about when you have all these constraints. And
Mhm.
an image came in my mind, an anecdote of this, like how product designers or UX UI designers, when it comes to actually designing their own portfolio, they have trouble figuring out what the hell is my own style, because you're so used to adapting, yeah, to the context you're in. So yeah, I find that quite funny.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. So we've touched on this a little bit, but let's unpack this a little bit more. I think collaboration.
This is great. Yeah.
So let's start with the first one. We don't have a product designer on our team. Where else can I look to find a mentor? Okay, so the first thing you want to do is go to ZAPD and join the mentorship channel.
Shameless plug.
ZAPD plug.
Nice.
So there is
Oh,
there's
slow
mentorship
clap. That was
channel there,
amazing.
yeah. And a ZAPD in general, is very open and welcoming. So that would be my first step. Yeah, join the community and see who in the community is willing to take on that role for you, and you'll find lots of people. People are very generous. Yeah,
They are more than we give them credit for sometimes. Yeah.
So that's my just initial kind of thing to say there. I'm sure you're going to find help there. You might not find someone who's going to, full-time personally be your mentor, but you're going to find a whole community of people who can help you with questions that you might have. Yeah. All right. Anything else anyone wants to add to that?
So many things. If you are just starting out, like I always tell my students, don't start out and Jen, you can probably attest to this. Like, your journey would have been very different if you just started freelancing right away.
Oh no, I wouldn't be here tonight. I would be
exactly. You'd be building like Wix websites.
Exactly. That's what I would do.
So I always tell my students, your first couple of years entering the field, prioritize growth above all else. Even if you take a pay cut, even if you do shitty work compared to some other place where you get more freedom to do cool stuff, your first couple of years should be in terms of working under someone and actually, having that osmosis in terms of, I think there's a lot of things that you can only learn by, I don't know, it's a lot of it. Yeah. And I think a lot of it it's just being around someone and getting a sense for how their brain works. And you almost start thinking like them and using the same words as them. I have had a couple of people like that in my career. And so, but then the question is, okay, but you might, or at this point, not be in that position. And also, I'm also surprised we haven't really even touched on kind of the recession and all of that stuff, and kind of the tech bubble that kind of started bursting last year and all of that. But so you might not have that option. Maybe you're already at a company and you can't change jobs or whatever. So meetups. That is 100%. And another thing as well is, when you go to meetups, the people that are going to be the most valuable to you in your career are going to be other juniors, because what happens is, not only can you have more meaningful discussions with those people, and they're kind of also much more open and have more time for you, as opposed to, I love when people come chat to me, but I can't if someone just randomly messages me on Slack asking me hey, what do you think about this design or whatever. I can't really spend time on that during the day. Whereas, but I think the other thing that I wanted to mention as well, what I find so much is, people come to meetups and they kind of mingle with other people that are also trying to break into product design or grow in product design. And what happens usually is one of those two people get hired. And then when a company is hiring, they're probably hiring more positions.
Yeah.
It's very rare that they're just hiring a product designer, end of story. We're only going to hire again in 10 years. They're probably hiring a couple. So one of them gets hired and they're like, hey, I have this actual friend and I can vouch for him. And like, yeah,
Mhm.
like he's trustworthy or whatever. Are you guys maybe interested in him come chat with you? And like, that's usually the in you have.
Yeah.
And I feel that is such a thing that gets so neglected. Even if
Yeah.
people go to meetups, they don't actually seek to really network and connect with other people who are still also learning and so forth.
Yeah.
But meetups,
Agree with that, Scott. Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Scott and I are not the valuable people to you when you come to the meetup.
You like don't take anything I say as advice in general.
Oh, sorry.
And then just to add to that, in terms of like trying to find a position where you can learn from someone, it's you also, I know this is difficult as well, given circumstances and everything, but not all organizations are good places for learning. Yeah.
Some organizations are going to make you a worse designer.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. So you also need to bear that in mind. Yeah. And always talk to people about, learning processes and how an organization approaches skills development, and learning for their employees, because that is such a crucial thing. And the organization that you want is the one that really embraces learning for its employees. Yeah. Because otherwise you can easily just get into a rut of you just doing the same thing over and over every day. You might have someone who's a senior UI designer or product designer or whatever it is who you're reporting into, but you're not really going to be learning anything because of the way the company dynamic works in that respect. And I know that's hard to find. Not all organizations are like that.
That's that.
But as Scott says, you can actually learn a whole lot of things you need to unlearn in some places. Yeah. You muted, Scott.
No, I was just agreeing. But yeah, like meetups. So, and also I think this warrants saying as well is that I like the fact that this concept of tutorial hell has kind of started gaining some traction in the world of software. I hope that it also starts getting traction in the world of design, because I see the same thing happening in design, probably even worse than in software. And the thing is, like, you can you can just Google tutorial hell if you don't know what it is. But effectively, it's very easy to get in a habit of just doing tutorials and doing courses, because that's easy. It's easy to it's like sitting back and watching someone else, and so it can also become a comfort zone for you, and there are certain types of learning that you're only gonna get by actually making mistakes.
Yes.
And one of the dangers of something like tutorial hell is thinking that, okay, I just need to do one more course. I just need to do one more boot camp. I just need to read one more book. And then I'll maybe try and design an app, or I'll try and build my own website. I'm a big fan of Chris Coyer's approach, which is basically any question around what should I learn, where should I focus, what should I specialize in, is answered by just build stuff. Build stuff, and build stuff for real use with no disclaimer.
For real people,
Yes. Find a friend who has a specific need. Find a nonprofit. Find whatever. Can I try and help you guys with something? But I think the key thing here is, Justin, are you familiar with Apprenticeship Patterns?
Yeah.
It's a phenomenal book, and one of the key patterns that I really like from that book is kind of this idea of a breakable toy, and that is you should, as a learning experience, build real things with no stakes. You don't want to be designing things, because the best way to learn is to do things, mess it up, honestly, one thing I find more often than not is specifically people who are just starting, they tend to over modularize their designs from day one. They tend to just like literally build out like all these low level like they almost build out this entire design system in Figma before they've really even have a good sense of what it is that they're designing. They're like, okay,
Yeah.
what should the scale of the typography be and whatever, instead of just like put some text on a page and just see what it looks like, and you can do the design system later. But so,
Components
and I
help.
think, yes, like do stuff, build stuff, stop overthinking things, but you need to do it in a way in which the goal is where failure is one of the acceptable outcomes.
Yeah.
And I think that's a key thing. Don't be like, I'm going to design this site for someone. I'm going to, build a website for this lawyer in my town or whatever. Unless you agree with them, it might be catastrophic, and and you don't have to use it. I'm going to try and build it, and maybe I'm like, this is too complicated. If I pull it off and it's cool, yeah, you're welcome to use it. Okay. But it's like this idea of a breakable toy. I'll actually maybe put a link to that as well. Like, to me, that has served very well in my own career because, believe it or not, I'm still learning a lot of stuff. And when I'm learning a new thing, start by building a project where absolute catastrophic failure is an acceptable outcome. And probably a very likely outcome if you don't have experience with anything. Yeah. Cool.
Great. Thanks for that, Scott. So questions on collaboration. Sure. We've been going for an hour, not 90 minutes. Are we all still good to carry on?
This time has flown by.
I know
Eskom willing. Eskom willing.
Right.
Yeah. Jen, you're in Canada, are you not?
I'm in Cape Town. Yeah, no, we've got a.
Oh, okay. All right. There we go.
No, load shedding's fine for me. Anyway, yeah. So collaboration. Now, this is a big thing. Yeah, we've touched on it a little bit. We find collaborative or autonomous designs to be more successful. My answer to this is I don't know. Well, it depends.
I can speak
to what you're doing.
Yeah, it depends what you're doing, very much so.
Like a combo of both, surely.
yeah. I think that is what works ideally. And on my team, we definitely try and follow that approach. That you have autonomy to pursue a solution in any way you see fit, but that's not going to go anywhere until it goes through a collaborative process where everyone weighs in on it. Yeah, but if you're just one person, I mean, it's always going to be autonomous. And can be very successful as well.
Sorry, I keep interrupting you.
Last point. This is also speaks to what Schalk was saying about waterfall. What is it? When you're having an autonomous design as one person and they're beavering away on their thing, they're likely working in some kind of a waterfall method. And that's not necessarily going to not be successful, but you can get a lot more pushback on that than you might do through a collaborative process. That question on being challenged and when do you stand your ground, etc., might become something that would. But then it's also within the nature of that kind of work. So I'm going to stick with my original I don't know, it depends answer.
Depends. No, that's very fair. A process that's coming to my mind when I read that question was style tests, or at least that's what we used to do at SpecNo, is we'd move into the UI phase. We have all these wireframes. Now we not start thinking about what is it going to look like visually. We'd both have to go and do a version of the UI autonomously, but then we come together and seeing, that's when the interesting stuff happens, because you might have a combination of elements from both styles. And so it's nice to create that environment too, because some people, they do prefer to just work alone. But I certainly grew so much as a designer when I just stopped being a control freak, or just stopped thinking that I knew everything. And I was very much like that in university. I didn't want to be in group projects whatsoever. But now I firmly believe that two minds are always better than one. And I
I
think
would have been your worst lecturer.
really, yeah, no, I was
Like I just
just
like group projects all the
no,
time,
totally. Like I've
everywhere.
completely
Yeah.
flipped because now, I mean, I used to measure the success of my client meetings on how little feedback I got, right? Because it meant it was perfect the first time, which is so dangerous because I mean, we're all working towards the same goal. And like, I think if you just humble yourself to think, okay, I've done this first iteration, it wasn't used, but you presenting that thing sparked a new idea. And so, yes, we've moved into a different direction, but perhaps in that meeting, we wouldn't have gone there if we didn't see what you did. So it's not lost just because it's not the final, right? Like, I think inviting that sort of collaborative mindset transformed my career and is just very healthy in general. So yeah, I think opening up yourself to feedback and knowing that the more it's scary when clients leave a ton of comments, you think you've done something wrong, but ultimately you're moving towards the point of being done. And so you should welcome it as much as possible and have shorter feedback loops as much as possible, in my mind.
Yeah, the trick is like feedback's a lot easier when you actually did the work collaboratively. When you didn't go away and like appear after a week, if everyone was involved in the decisions, then it's much easier to have discussions about, yeah, this actually really sucks, and we didn't think this through. I don't know. I don't honestly. I don't know how. I don't know. Like, to me, it's not about autonomy or collaborativeness. Like, you need both. And it depends on the team as well. You get those teams where like everyone sits together and they try and unpack the thing, and everyone's just like, and everyone's too scared to say something, and my ideas can be stupid. What I actually find really helpful is time boxing. Actually, as you mentioned, having really short time boxes. So having a big meeting, and then being like, okay, cool, let's do a 15-minute time box. Cool. You know what you're going to try. Okay, cool. Let's do 50 minutes. Go, go, go. All right, and then let's come back together. And like that momentum is really great. So in an ideal world, that is how I would just do my day job from 8 o'clock till 5 o'clock. But there are realities in terms of other meetings that people need to attend. People need to do other things as well. They can't just be workshopping all the time. Yeah. But I do think what you want to do, like, to me, collaborative or autonomous is not really one or the other. Like you combine them both. Mm-hmm. Bigger question is, what is the iteration cycles? Like, how long does it go for you where you switch from autonomous to collaborative, and then from collaborative back to autonomous? And I think, to me, that's a much more interesting discussion. Do you do that quite quickly? Do you do that the day later? Or that's a much more interesting conversation, but it depends so much on the team, and
it's very team.
I honestly, I don't know, like, I don't know how people don't design without continual sanity checks. I would drive myself mad, and like I did when I was a student. Very much like you mentioned, Jenna, I was the type of person who would just disappear, and then I just show up at hand. And I think some of that has to do with kind of an obsession with artifacts, as opposed to making meaningful decisions, which makes sense as a student because you want a nice portfolio. But I don't like nowadays. Like, you can't leave me for longer than 4 hours on my own. I'm going to drive myself mad. I'm going to be like, maybe make this bigger, maybe make this smaller, maybe a different typeface. Like, at some point, I need to talk to someone and talk through the design. I'm going to lose my mind. And I think that's the space you want to get at. Yeah, when you get to that point where, like, how do I design without talking to people? That's a good place to be at.
Yeah, agreed. You need that kind of loop to be closed all the time, continually. And also, as you said, like, the art, don't fixate on the artifact. That's not what we do.
that is like how much time do we have left? But
Not enough.
yes, I think there's some interesting discussions there about how AI kind of really kind of
Wait, I'm going to stop you. We have that question later.
Yeah, we do have an
Hold
AI
that
question.
thought.
Oh, do we?
Yes.
Can I
hold
just
that
give
thought.
okay. I'll wait until the AI question. But there's some interesting discussions about artifacts and AI.
Yeah, I
And-
absolutely agree. But I'm just cognizant of time.
Yes, let's go.
I'm packing the whip. Can we just look at the last one for first here in terms of biggest challenge in collaboration within product design teams with like remote and hybrid work? I think, so if you don't mind, I'll go first. So I think
My answer is just going to be a single word.
Now I'm in suspense. What's the single word?
Waterfall. No, honestly, like remote work is so easy if you do daily stand-ups. Period.
Yeah. No, of course. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. But also I think, so when, obviously when COVID hit and we all went remote, we didn't go remote like as a planned thing and being prepared for it and having processes. And I don't know what it was like for other organizations, but for us, for the first month, we were just trying to like recreate the office online. Yeah. And that is an absolute disaster. You just cannot do it. Yeah. And no one, we are never going back to the office. It's never going to happen. We're always going to be remote from now on.
Well, you don't have a roof anymore, do you? So
we fixed the roof.
Is the roof okay? So you can physically go back to the office, but
but no one wants to.
In principle, you're not going to, but you can physically now. Yeah,
physically,
the roof
you can.
off.
Some people like to go to the office. That's fine for them. They can go. Most of us don't go. But just to bring this specifically back to design, you've got to do stand-ups. Yeah, you have to. And you have to do stand-ups in a very particular way, in my experience. You can't do these stand-ups where there's a project manager with a Jira board open and moving tickets around, which is like a lot of stand-ups I've seen are like that. That is the worst thing to do. You need to keep them. You need to just do your classic stand-up routine. I did this. I'm doing this. I need help with this, whatever it might be. You just need to really keep a rein on those. Yeah, stand-ups cannot be derailed in any way because people just switch off immediately. Yeah. So that's
which is where that's kind of stand up. Like, so the principle is, and we had this at Open Up, like you had to stand. You weren't allowed to. If someone leaned against a wall or a desk, or they were called out, and that's the point. Like you have, you need to be uncomfortable because I think the rule is under 15 minutes. If it takes longer than 15 minutes, you're no longer doing stand up. Yeah.
No, you're not. You're just doing another meeting. Yeah.
You're doing planning.
Yes, planning, exactly. And the other thing in terms of design that for us is like our Figma is so organized. I'm telling you, it's insane. Yeah.
Nice.
I don't know whether you're being sarcastic now or real.
No, I'm being deadly serious.
Really?
You have no idea how much time I put into thinking about organizing a Figma for a design team. And it is, anyway, I'm not going to go into our methodology or anything because there's 3,000 different ways to do it. But everyone agreeing on this is how we structure things. This is how we use Figma. We are big on branching, always using branching in Figma because of the collaborative nature of the work that we're doing. Yeah. So, so keeping your Figma, this is just a technical thing, but keeping your Figma clean and usable is much harder than it sounds. Yeah.
That's true.
I'm also super strict on detaching library components and things like that. Yeah. So on our Figma, I can see where I get stats from Figma on how many times a library component has been detached. And I'm like,
you get a Slack notification. and it tags the
Oh my
perpetrator
Yeah, calls them out on the entire
at channel.
all internal communication tools. Emails get fired off. Designer A detached a button component at 11:03 a.m. No, nothing like that happens. I'd love that. No, I'm kidding. I'm fairly easygoing with everything, but that's one thing that is like really, because we are a service business, so we don't design and build our own products. We work for clients, and the potential for everything just to become an absolute mess it's really easy. You drop the ball in like a large Figma organization plan for a couple of weeks and you're never getting it back. So
yeah, that's true.
Very strict rules around that, and everyone knows and buys into them and works that way. And also branching is a lifesaver. Yeah.
There was kind of like at some point there was kind of this surge of kind of like talking about kind of this concept of maybe design ops as a role and so forth, and then it kind of like faded away, and I never really heard about it again much. But I don't know, maybe I'm not in the circles where it's being discussed. But
wrote a whole book on it. No.
Oh, is it? Okay. So
to be honest, it's underwhelming.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, it's like, make sure all your licenses for your software are up to date. That kind of stuff.
And it's
very
also
managerial, bureaucratic.
And it's also one of those things where it's like the answer is it depends. What are you going to do? But I also think one thing to be cognizant of, Justin, is that obviously kind of the system that you have is something that have been grown and shaped through various years in terms of your own personal understanding of what works and what doesn't work, and also just the processes themselves. Like, you've been at NML for a very long time as well, so you've had a lot of time. So I almost want to say I think that's kind of the exception more often than not, which is why I asked you if you're being sarcastic. And I do think sometimes like people tend to want to enforce like build technical solutions for these things where it might just be as easy as having a single markdown file just with some rules or a notion with like, listen, buttons need to have 4 pixels border radius or whatever, period.
No, absolutely.
So so obviously but like and like I find that like a lot of teams would just get a lot of mileage from just having a shared document where you just write it out in terms of setting up like some crazy design library thing with component hierarchy levels and inheritance and whatever.
Could not agree more. And just have it as a Figma file.
That as well, but have it as an actual page. Have some rules. And people can comment on that.
We've got that's these are the guidelines, these are the things we follow. Here's how to name your Figma variables. This is what we prefer for border radius. This is what we prefer to name spacing. Here's a typographic scale we find that works most of the time, but you're not bound to it, etc. etc. All those kinds of things. Just simply documented. I think it's like a 5-page document, and it just covers all those use cases.
And so I'm curious, Jen, because obviously at Specna and so forth, you guys, and even what you're doing now, you work on a variety of different things, So obviously, Justin, like, so when he's talking, he's been working like kind of with the same team on the same type of products. Very established things with big design systems now for a very long time. I'm curious, like how that played out when you're kind of specifically working in terms of MVPs and stuff. They maybe don't have the luxury of saying you're not allowed to detach. It's probably like there isn't anything to even detach in the first place.
A lot of things for detach, just many notifications. We definitely had, a design system. We called it Apollo because we were going to the moon. So we had like a spec node design system, but then yeah, every new project, new Figma file, we would pull those components in, detach them, and almost make a little mini design system for the client. But it did get to a point where that was an added on service because it is very time consuming.
Yes.
And it was more often than not just like a sticker sheet of components rather than a fully documented system. So yeah, I think that is design systems and research were the first to fall away from quotes when it comes to MVPs, right? Like they don't even have enough money for the flipping product. So yeah, all those luxuries unfortunately do fall away, and then it's just hard to also communicate the value of them long term, because actually, it's something that you would have wished you set up in the beginning, but this is also a thing of winning battles. Like how do you communicate that things like research or design systems actually save time in the long run? So that also is another talking point.
I have very
completely get that point of view as well. Like you're moving fast. You need to get something out the door in a month.
Like the UI informed the branding. We would just slap a quick logo as well, like 30 minutes logo. That's the environment.
Yeah,
right.
No, that's a very, very different environment.
And like I like my UX South Africa talk last year was basically like, to paraphrase, you probably don't need a design system. Like and like I do think what's very interesting to me is I think there's a lot of learnings that have happened over the years in software development, in terms of going in one direction and then maybe realizing, we went too hard in that direction, and pulling it back a bit, and which I think like kind of product design or digital product design is still very young-ish as a field, and it's still learning all those things. And I definitely think like maybe it's kind of easing up now a bit, but maybe 2 years ago, kind of we were in the prime of what would I guess be kind of the equivalent of like the OOP craze in software, where it's like everything can be systematized, and you have these things and you have these relationships between them, and like everything can be a system. And then at some point you're like just managing a flippant system instead of doing design work. Like at some point, like you can actually move faster by just saying, here's some loose rules, just adhere to these rules, and let's just kind of work a bit more loose, a bit more fast, and so forth. Which is and I do think as well is I'm also a very big believer in terms of doing a design system retroactively. Because building some basic version of the thing, and then being like, okay, cool, what are some commonalities? Doing like an interface inventory and whatever, and figuring out what are the things that should be abstracted. Because you create this thing and you go through all this effort, like in terms of figuring out how it can be extended, and you can nest the icon in it, and you can align it to the left and the right, and you do use that thing one time, and you don't ever use that reusable component ever again in your life. Like I have so many stories of that. So I don't know.
I don't disagree with that. I think you're right that you may not need a design system. If you're designing a website, you need some typographic styles and some color variables, and you're off. And you're off to the races. Maybe a card that's reusable or something.
Basically.
And those can be local components. It doesn't need to sit in a separate library that you're linking and blah blah blah.
Yeah. Is this the part where we pull in the if it's not in code, it's design suggestions? Or do you not want to make the people mad or like that mad already? Okay. No, it's from
that. But anyway,
Mark Dalgish, is it not?
But the flip side to that, and again, I'll go back to the kind of work that we do. We build these like highly complex web applications, and we know in that application, there's going to be a number input. There's going to be an input with an icon. Yes. There's going to be an input with a hint. There's going to be a label, etc. And so we have a strong idea upfront what we're going to need. And to have that available as a library makes building out those screens a breeze.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, but We don't go and look at, well, how many inputs are there in HTML? Oh, there are like 11. Let's design 11 variants. We go and say, okay, we need a text input and a number input. We've got 2 variants. And then if we need something down the line, then we go and you update the component. Yeah. So it's a kind of a hybrid sort of approach to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, but I'm as guilty. I'm as guilty as anyone of kind of like over designing systems because it's
Yeah.
fun.
It is
Like,
fun.
Yeah, it's
Satisfying.
fun. Like, please, like, come on, let's be real. Like, when you have these 3 different things and you have this one widget that can solve all 3 of them, like, that's a great feeling. It's a, whew,
It is.
like
No,
it's
it's
like it's
amazing.
fun and it's great.
Fantastic.
Like, but like we should be careful of that for that
Yeah.
exact reason. Like, are we just scratching our own itches, or
Yeah.
are we actually providing value? Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
Well, 2 hours and we're not even close to finishing.
Really? Let's speed run.
I think maybe we need to just do a part 2.
Yeah.
We can
Uh,
do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Because
So-
we've still got 5 slides of questions.
Oh, really? Oh, jeez.
Oh, are we even halfway? I'm not sure.
We're like halfway.
Let's take a 10-minute break. Let's do the other 2 hours. Okay, yeah. So I think what we can maybe do, like, kind of with eye on, like, kind of thinking about ending off, is maybe because we did say that we're going to give a Takealot voucher to whoever asks the best question, and I'd be curious amongst ourselves what we think was the best question. Can you maybe just bring it up again so we can just quickly flip through them, Justin? So I'm curious what everyone's thoughts are. Okay. Sure, there's some we didn't even touch on. For me, like, the one that I would probably say is the one, like, asking about, like, how do you get mentorship if you're the only designer in a team?
I like that one too.
I think that's probably the best one.
This one.
Yeah, we don't have that would be my nomination.
Oh, it's tough because I like the collaboration questions as well.
Well, some of these might be by the same person, so I'll have a look.
In fact, they're all by Justin.
All by ChatGPT.
No, I can confirm that this is from a Google form.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
so from my side, like, another one that I also thought was great in terms of how do you decide which battles to fight and so forth. But I think what I like about the mentorship one is I think that is something that doesn't get asked enough. It's not necessarily that it's so much of a better question than any of the other ones. It's just, like, to me, it's very nice when someone actually asks that.
and the answer to that is the gift that keeps on giving. It's like you start with mentorship, all these other questions will get addressed.
Yeah, you'll get answers to the rest. Well, and it's also because the answer is zapped. There you go, Justin.
Hey, look at that full circle moment.
We could have spent that 250 Rand Takealot voucher on Google Ads instead. Yeah. I'm curious what you guys think.
I'm happy to go with the mentor one.
Yeah, no, me as well. Because I'd say that's the one that people got the most. I don't know, because I'm trying to measure the value of these questions, like the answer to it. What did they get the most out of? I like the ones about role definition because I think it's interesting to argue about. But maybe they didn't get the most value from that discussion, like learning. Like, I loved what you went on about. It's called the meetups. Like, I think those are the things people entering the field, they want to hear that. They want to feel that they've got somewhere to go. So yeah, let's just call it there, I'd say.
Okay, what are the runner-ups, just as an aside?
The winner is Michelle.
Yay!
I will say though, that my very own brother asked the question about personal taste versus practicality. So
Oh,
shout
really?
out to him.
Yeah, yeah.
But that wasn't in the Google form, so we'll discard that.
And
This
also,
is your brother.
there's some
That's
conflict
my
of
brother.
interest.
Another Fenter, Skulk.
Well, but see, that this is the thing. Like I saw that, and I didn't immediately think, "Hey, is this guy somehow related to me or Jane?" I think that just tells you something about like it's
Surname.
So if their surname was Slack, I would be like, Justin, is this like your cousin or something?
I don't have I have a fairly unusual surname. Yeah.
Slack is
Yes.
a cool surname.
Yes,
Nice.
it is. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Mr. Slack. Yeah.
Thanks to everyone on the stream who joined us and for those questions. We will definitely run a part 2 and
We
we'll go
should.
through the rest of your questions because we did get a bit carried away there. But thanks for everyone who submitted. There was a really great bunch of questions and I think we had a good discussion. Find us on ZAPD. Last one for the year, and we'll see you in the new year. And thanks very much, Jen, for joining us.
Yes, this was
Thanks,
great.
Enjoyed it.
I had a great time. Thanks for having me.
Great.
Okay, cool.
Cool.